Welcome to episode 4, I believe we're on. You have your co-host Zachary Ellis, dapper as ever, and we have
Thank you.
our
Thank you.
our beautiful guest here, Kimmy,
Mm.
I guess Ella Kimberly Kilpack Russell. Do you even use all those names anymore?
All the names, all the time.
Perfect. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You can give a general introduction, and then we can ask you some questions and get down to business.
Okay. Um, I don't know if you really want to know. I feel like I'm not that excited, but um, I'm a mom to three kids. I just had a baby 5 weeks ago. So that's been an adventure and exhausting, but great. And I am married to Eric, and we've been married for almost 10 years now, which seems crazy. Um, and yeah, I this the picture that's up. I teach high fitness, um, so that's fun. Something extra that I do. I don't know. What else do you want to know about me?
So generally we ask a couple questions about religious background. Yours is pretty similar to mine, having grown up in the same household. But I feel like we might have experienced different things as
Hmm.
we grew up, right? Just where our interests are different. You might have,
Right.
um, I don't know, like what you would necessarily focus on in a young woman's, or like what moving to Utah was like for you, being a junior in high school, kind of stuff like that.
Yeah. Um, for sure. I feel like stuff at church would have been different, right? I feel like, um, I don't know. I mean, do they ask you to make a list of qualities that you want in a wife in your men's?
I was asked twice to like write a letter to myself and say like what you want in a wife, and then put it away and come back and check it.
Mm, yeah. I I'm sure I had lists, but I don't even know what. By the time I met Eric, it just all went in the air. I guess I just took him as he was. um, yeah, so I feel like some of that maybe was a little bit different. I feel like, especially when I was in Young Women's, it was a lot of, I don't know, I feel like the conversations probably changed a little bit in Young Women's currently than it was when I was in Young Women's. Um, just in that I feel like a lot of ours was about like homemaking type stuff and being a mother. And obviously there was other stuff to it, but I feel like now the conversations changed a little bit where that's still there in Young Women's, but I think they also talk a lot more about maybe some more self development qualities and like current, like receiving personal revelation and things like that, that I feel like are a little more probably what the conversation more so is now than it was when I was in Young Women's. Um, but yeah, I was a junior when we moved to Utah, and it actually I feel like it was a good time for me after mom died. Um, there was just a shift or a change in my friendships. I think some of that came from people not knowing, I guess, just immaturity of age, right? Where people didn't know how to respond to someone who had just been through something so sad. And so I think that was part of it. And then I think there was also immaturity on my part where I didn't know how to navigate my emotions of losing mom. So like I wanted people to be there, but I also wanted no one to be there. So I'm sure that made some relationships a little tougher. So moving to Utah for me, I feel like was less hard than it was for you. Part of that just could have been personality that I may be a little more outgoing on our first conversations with people, maybe just by who I am. But I don't know. Utah was really great for me. I feel like it was a good change, and it came at a good time for me, and it helped me learn. Um, I almost feel like one of the best things that I learned from moving to Utah is that you get to pick and choose your friendships, that you're not stuck in friendships. Not that I was stuck in friendships in Texas, but I just feel like it taught me that I get to pick and choose who I want to spend my time with. And I feel like that's bode me well through the rest of my life.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm curious just because I didn't experience this. Growing up in Texas, you had certain experiences with like members and in the church, young women's, all of that. And then I'm sure it was different when you came to Utah. So how was that different? Like what was like one of the main things I guess you saw in the difference there?
Um, I kind of feel like young women's was almost the same for me. Like I didn't feel like I guess the Utah culture. I didn't feel like that like bled through into my young women's necessarily, and I attribute that a lot to some of my leaders. But I felt like maybe the ward as a whole felt a little different. I don't know. I feel like in Texas, and even I lived in Milwaukee for 4 years too. So just being outside of Utah, I feel like there's obviously people who are still judgy and have a very specific mindset of what it looks like to be a good member of the church. I feel like there's also much more understanding that people come from different backgrounds, and people get to have a little bit of different opinions. Where I feel like in Texas, if a woman showed up to church in pants, she wasn't making some political statement. Where maybe in Utah, it was like, oh, she's showing up to church in pants. Like, she must be like trying to get the priesthood. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a little bit of that, but um, I definitely don't. As a young woman, I didn't feel that in my personal classes that I had.
Okay. Um, One thing that you mentioned that you wish you had, I don't know if you said you wish you had learned more, but that the current focus is more on personal revelation and personal growth. Why was that something that like sticks out to you as being different? And what do you hope that you could like maybe pass on to someone coming up in your similar path as you?
I just feel like I was someone who, in my religious experience with my personality, I took everything that was said to me and taught to me as law. Like that was, if somebody said it to me in the class, then that must be the truth, and that's how things are supposed to be. Versus being like, this is something that you're being taught, but it's also your responsibility to dive into it and develop your own testimony of that. Because I definitely feel like I was encouraged to get my own testimony. But I also, just with my personality, I wish there would have been more conversation of um, maybe how to get, and I know Kristen talked about this a little bit too, but how to get your own personal revelation. And I just feel like maybe because today I feel like there's so much more information out there, whether it's social media or just in TV and in shows and whatever. Like there's so much stuff being thrown at you that wasn't being thrown at me as a teenager. That I feel like that's probably why I put more emphasis on personal relation or revelation now, is because there's so much information to decipher through that it's important for you to be able to do that independently.
All right, and there's so many people trying to put out misinformation, whether it be political, whether it's religious.
Right.
Really hard to decipher through it all. And if you don't have a base of learning how to tell the truth by yourself, it becomes really difficult. But
Yeah,
along with
absolutely.
self growth, you originally started studying like psychology, sociology, and getting into social work for a while there. Um, that's the title of your degree, right? Social work.
My the title of it is family. I have to think about it. It's been so long since I had to say family, consumer, and human development. But I did an emphasis in community services. So it's basic. It was basically a social work type degree where my emphasis was on how to help people out in the community.
Gotcha. And do you feel like that has helped you find your path through? We're gonna get talking about high fitness here in a second.
I don't feel like my degree has led me there. It's maybe led me there, and um, it's given me awareness of like through my degree. A lot of it is just like helping people, and then a job I had in Logan. There was a lot of like mental health focus and making sure that the moms that I was working with were able to have the resources they need. And so I feel like that helps me, I guess, identify um, that as the mom. I mean, I feel like I'm like going in a circle. Basically, I feel like my degree didn't necessarily lead me to high fitness. Actually, looking back, I wish that I would have done like a physical science degree. Uh, but I feel like my role as a mom that led me to high fitness because I needed an outlet outside of being a wife and being a mom. So there you go.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like, especially now, there's a lot more on social media that I see of moms coming together to support each other and acknowledging the difficulties it is of being a mom and like the expectations that come along with it. Like everyone tells you it's going to be the best days of your life, but you've been cleaning up poop and throw up for years and it doesn't ever seem to end, right?
Right. I feel like I actually just, I'm part of this mom Facebook group because what mom isn't? And somebody actually just posted about that saying, why didn't anybody tell me that it was going to be so hard? And I feel like I had friends that were pretty open and honest about that there was things that were hard. But until you experience some of the monotony of doing the same thing every day, in and out, and just the constant being pulled on, and not even just like emotionally pulled on, but physically pulled on. I mean, you've been around my kids, you know what it's
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that all is. I'm sure it's hard work. So I mean, I'm sure that your kids are going to appreciate all the work that you've done. And so my question about the high fit then is why that? Like I know that there are so many different groups and so many different things that you could go into with a group of moms, like come together, but like why high fit specifically? What attracted you about that one?
It honestly was like the first class I went to was so fun. I had a friend when I was in Milwaukee who had certified as a high fitness instructor, and I never heard of that fitness format before. And so, because of social media, I was able to see like clips of classes and stuff, and I was like, oh, that like totally feels like my jam. It has like really fun music, and it's like so positive, but it's also really physically challenging. Um, Jesse, you should ask Bobby. He thought that it was like, oh, it's just a bunch of girls doing this. And then brother tried it and was like, oh, that actually is pretty hard. So I think it was just the feeling I got in class was just, it was motivating, and it was so fun and distracting that I wasn't in class being like, oh, I hate this. I'm like sweating and this is hard. And it was like, no, like this is great. And it kind of brought back that I guess like empowering is the word that I'm looking for. Like it was just like, no, this is great and I can do this. So I wanted to certify for my first class and then waited a while and then finally certified, and I've loved it.
That's awesome.
And you're growing quite a bit. Like, um, even through all this COVID stuff, you were able to find a way to get all these girls out there moving and grooving, and it's pretty inspiring to me because it's not an easy task organizing a couple people, let alone all these people to go work out.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been fun. And I feel like that's another part of it is I've loved all the friends that I made from it. The picture that you have posted, we did and this was part of the reason I wanted to do high fitness too, is they do a lot of fundraiser events. And so this one was for our rescue. Um, it was to help raise awareness and some funds for them. But yeah, I think I'm definitely not the only mom who, in a way, needs an escape. And that's, I feel like escape's the wrong word, but just needs a moment to rejuvenate.
Yeah, I mean it's a job. It's like a you're doing this all the time. Like it's more than a job is what I mean to say. Like it's not just a you show up for 8 hours and then you go home. So you definitely need that, like you say, it's not quite an escape, but it's time to just go do something you like to do and not worry about the kids and all the things that are going on. So I absolutely understand that. And I think that that's crucial to get. You need your you time, whatever helps you feel good and empowered, like you said.
Yeah. And I just think like the physical benefits too have been awesome. Like I was able to work out almost my whole pregnancy and my recovery after this one. Like I went and taught a class yesterday and I had a baby 5 weeks ago, which I couldn't have done with either of my two babies before. So it definitely physically helps too.
Better shape than I am, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it helps that you have a supporting husband in all this. Not to detract from the women's side of this to bring in a man, but you know, I am grateful that Eric has supported you and loved you and your children so much.
Yeah, he's been awesome. I was even telling him yesterday that I really appreciated him. Um, because then he gets to do bedtime, and he's really great about it because he's not a dad. Like we have some friends who they kind of consider it babysitting when they have to watch their own kids when their wife is gone. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, you're so welcome for like watching the kids for you." And it's like, no, like you're in a partnership. They're your kids too. And so I feel like Eric's really great about that, that he like knows he had jokes about it, but like he knows and embraces that they're his kids too. He's not babysitting them. Um, but he definitely has been super supportive of me doing this because it's especially when I first started, because you have to learn like an hour's worth of choreography and then each class it changes and then you have to learn more. So he definitely um, is very supportive of the time that it takes for me to do this.
Nice. And I know that a lot of like physical activity, we're gonna tie this into our next subject, um, can really ground you as a person. And for some people, hiking is a great way to ground yourself into nature or really get connected with the earth. And you want to talk about spirituality and kind of connecting that with organized religion. High fitness is organized. I don't know if you consider that a religion though. What really intrigues you about the concept of spirituality or meditation or grounding yourself to the universe?
I think part of it actually it's a more of a yoga based thing that's like on my bucket list to become a yoga instructor. Um, I used to be kind of a hater of yoga just because I don't know. I feel like high fitness. Part of the reason I love it is it's so like up and it's cardio and it's fast and it's powerful and it's hard hitting. Um, which for me, like after playing basketball and things like that, like that's just my jam of exercise. Like that's what speaks to my soul. But after doing a few yoga classes and forcing myself to slow down and in a way like really connect with my body, like through your breath and through your thoughts, I think that's what kind of leads me more into this topic of um, when I was talking to somebody about certifying as a yoga instructor, they were like, "Oh, can you do that as a member of the church?" And obviously, that's a silly mindset, but it came out of a place of um, that there's beliefs within like yoga culture that don't mesh with organized religion.
All right, me and Zach have definitely talked some stuff about this. Not necessarily in the context of doing yoga. I know there's a lot of Hinduism, sometimes Buddhism applied to that practice. But Zach, you've been looking into a lot of Stoicism lately. Maybe you could enlighten us with some of your philosophy.
Yes. No. I was just gonna say. I think like I know that I've gotten this question before where I've been talking with people and I've mentioned aloud, like I'll tell people that I believe myself to be a practicing Stoic while being a member of the church. And the question abounds all the time where they're like, well, you can't, you're a member of the church, right? You can't be doing something else. And I was kind of just really in agreement with what Kimmy is saying about this, about how it can fit in there. You know, you have to find your lines on where it fits. But what I would say is that it isn't that kind of what the church is doing anyways, like in a small way. Let me give the example of like the yoga meditation, right? The whole point of meditation, and I practice meditation daily, 5 minutes, is to keep your mind focused on something, whether it's nothing or just counting to 20, you know? And it's to keep your brain focused. So like you have they always call it the monkey brain that just spouts off random things all the time in your head whenever you're trying to like just listen to your body or be quiet or whatever. Your monkey brain's just going on and on and on and saying random stuff. And so the whole practice of meditation is focused around either giving that monkey a task to do, like count to 20, or something to ground yourself to do meditation. And so really what that comes down to, in my opinion, isn't that the same thing, at least for me, that's the same thing when I pray. This is the same thing when I read my scriptures. I hear my monkey brain going off for hours and I have to just really calm myself down and say, focus on what you're saying, focus on what you're telling your Heavenly Father right now, you know? So to me, it's very similar, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that. In fact, I think it just helps you become a better member if you do these things correctly. So I'm a big advocate for applying philosophy and meditation and things that you can find, kind of like we talk about here, you and I, Jesse. Like truth can be found anywhere, and it shouldn't be seen as only the church has the truth. So find that truth where it is and bring it into your life because you'll be better for it. Um, and it will never go against the church's beliefs because the church is all about finding the truth and becoming a better person through utilizing that truth. So that's like one of my big opinions, is that I think that philosophy and meditation is great for members of the church as long as they utilize it to better themselves, because that's the whole point.
Right. I think was it Marcus Aurelius? I think it was probably him. He has a lot of quotes in the Stoic world. He talked
Meditations
about
is his
well, not. Oh yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. I cut you off
the
before I guess. Yeah,
meditations.
yeah, yeah. I got you. I was like, my quote's not about meditation. I don't know where you're going. But he said, if you're not practicing philosophy to become a better person, then you're just using words to critique other words. Is the idea? Is
Yes.
we're all trying to become better people at the end of the day, and I'll pull this up. I think he says, seek knowledge out of the best books. I think is how it's put in D&C.
I'm trying to.
Scriptures. Dang it. Doesn't it say something like that in D&C?
I think Yeah, just try out of the best books and see what happens.
Maybe I don't know my scriptures.
Is it a?
I thought it was in D&C. It might have been like a discourse someone gave, or the site just might be freaking out. Anyway,
I mean, if you go to the, yeah.
I mean, we can try to find it, but the idea is in D&C it tells you to seek knowledge out of the best books. It doesn't. That doesn't say you can only read the scriptures. It doesn't say you can only learn from the prophets and the apostles, but you can learn from anybody in the world, and as long as it's congruent with what the Savior teaches, what brings you closer to Him, then we take those things, we apply them.
Mm-hmm. So for you, Kimmy, you mentioned how like the yoga is a thing that you're getting into that you want to do more of. I guess like what in general, just what is your opinion on that, fitting that meditation and yoga into organized religion? Like how do you see that in your life, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I feel really similar where I feel like it is aligned. Like I think, I don't know, I feel like, and I'm not well versed in, like, I know you have like the 5 chakras that people talk about, but I'm not well versed in all the different aspects of it. I'm very, very beginner. But I think the idea of yoga where it's like your breath can heal you and that you have these parts in your body that hold tension and that you're able to release those through movement and through breath, I think that's absolutely aligned, right? Where it's like, I don't know, exactly like what you said, like if you're praying and pondering, and I feel like meditation is just another word for pondering. That if you're taking that time, I think we are able to have the gift to heal ourselves in that aspect, right? Like we're physically able to take some breaths, and scientifically it's been proven, right, that breath can calm you as you learn to control it. And so why wouldn't a practice like that, for me, why wouldn't that align with becoming a more spiritual being? Because the more connected you are with yourself, the more connected you can be to others, I think. And even one of the chakras is at the top of your head. I don't know what it's called, but it's basically your spiritual one, where the more open you are to that, the more open you are to like basically receiving revelation. And obviously, it's not the same language that's used in yoga, but the more open you are to connecting to your Heavenly Father and to Christ, and I don't know, more in tune of like any kind of spiritual guidings that come to you. So I'm like totally on board that I think they absolutely can coexist.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like one of the things that you were kind of mentioning there that I just want to touch on real quick is the health benefits that come from meditation. Like as I read into this more and more, because I'm a big believer in, I mean, we talk about it all the time, looking into these things and seeing what validity there is and seeing if there is any truth there, and if there is, why not apply it. So anyways, I spent time looking into meditation, and the health benefits are very, very prominent, and they have been shown in scientific studies multiple times. And I think that one thing that I've noticed as I do my meditation every day is that controlling my emotions and controlling my decision making is a lot easier personally. When I meditate, my mind is calmer, and I can logically think to myself, I don't need to do that right now. I can wait, and I can do this thing right now, or whatever. And it just makes my life better in that aspect, where I'm easier, better able to make decisions that will benefit my life, and I'm more in control of my emotions, the person that I want to be, instead of being more emotional in my reactions. And so like there are so many health benefits that are proven through meditation that I think that's kind of where you were going with that as well, is along with the the yoga stances and poses that go along with stretching your physical body, it also helps your mental and emotional statuses as well. So, agreed.
It definitely helps you focus on that idea of putting the like mind over matter and putting you in that realm of controlling your actions, not reacting on impulse, not letting your natural desires run your life, but being conscious and being aware and helping you grow spiritually and closer to God. On the flip side of these things where we're talking about taking good practices out of more spiritual lifestyles and truth wherever we can find it, there is a growing, I won't call it a movement, but a sentiment of spirituality over religion, as if the two are incompatible. That you need that, oh, I'm a spiritual person, but I don't go to church. And I've kind of gone back and forth with that because they make the good point of, I'm making a personal relationship between me and God, and that's all I need. And I think they slightly missed the mark. In my opinion, I think that church is necessary. Otherwise, Christ wouldn't have organized one. And as I've said multiple times, that we don't save ourselves directly. Like, Christ didn't come down just for me, right? He came for you, he came for you, he came for everybody. And we're supposed to together rise up and be united in trying to return back to our Heavenly Father, right? So how do you feel about, or either one of you, if you want to feel about that spirituality versus religion kind of concept?
You can go first, Kimmy, if you have anything.
Okay. I feel like I can see it both ways. I can see that shift, and I almost wonder if that shift's gonna a little bit come back, not necessarily full circle, but if you even look at the church and the way that policies have changed, and I don't even know what the right word, but like maybe the dynamics of the church have changed, and changed in a way of where I feel like culture maybe led the church a certain way, and President Nelson is now kind of pulling it back and being like, no, like even going back to being like, no, it's called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the focus of this church is Christ. And the way even like the home-centeredness and how important the family is, I feel like there's been a shift in the church where I think the church for so long, I'll just say as a culture, became very traditional. And I think that there was this mindset that the more time you invested being an active member, living your religion in a way of doing your callings and home teaching and all these things that have now shifted a little bit, right? Where the focus is time spent at home versus time spent at church. I think historically, even with our parents' generation, right? Like that's where the time was spent was at church, and that's where people perceived if I spend enough time at church, blessings will just trickle everywhere else in our life. And so I feel like part of this shift is people continuing, I don't know if rebel is the right word, but to say, I don't want this traditional life where my whole life is spent at church, hours into these callings, hours into these meetings. And I do think that there's a shift in the world in general to say, I don't want anyone telling me what to do, even if that's Christ, even if that's God, that they want to make their own decisions and their own choices. And in a way, I think that's people saying that that's where they're going to find their spirituality, is in a place where they're not being told what to do and how to live their life. And I think maybe a little bit with this swing in the church where it's becoming so much more family focused, that maybe people will find that spirituality outside of the church. and then realize, oh, maybe I do want a little more structure, and maybe I do want a little more of those pieces, and maybe they can come kind of find those pieces together, because I feel like I'm in the middle camp there. I don't know that I have super strong opinions on either side, because I feel like I'm at a point where I can see both sides, and I'm kind of in the middle of where in my faith journey I'm like, I am trying to find my own relationship with God, and also with that relationship with God deciding how that melds into the church, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see where you're coming from. I think that, in my opinion, they are not mutually exclusive. You need both. You need to have your own personal spirituality, but you also do need the experiences that a organized church can provide. Also, the organization is good for a lot of other reasons, obviously, but if we look at it just from strictly a spiritual standpoint, I think that there are so many reasons that it is necessary, because I don't know, I got a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm going to try and organize it as best I can so that it's not just jumbled logic. Um, One of the reasons that I think it's very important is because I always think about the quote from the scriptures that says, "When you're in the service of your fellow men, you are in the service of God." That is all that callings are really there for, is so that we can serve and give those opportunities to all of the members of the church to serve people so that they can serve their God. And I know that when I serve, I feel closer connected to my God. I feel that spirituality increase, even if the person isn't very grateful for whatever I'm doing. It is what it is. But I think that that's one of the reasons that it's very important, because it gives every member a chance to serve. And then, as well, I would say, this thought goes along with it. I remember asking my mission president, well, he kind of did a rhetorical question to us where he was talking about, if, let's say that we know God is perfect, and we know that there's a millennium after this planet before we move on to the final judgment. So in that millennium, he could have all this work pumped out like that, like, why are there missionaries right now in the world? Why do we do temple work for people? Why do we do all these things? Like, really, is it that necessary? Like, could we kind of just cool it where we're at, and things would be fine? And it goes back to the same thing, where when you are doing work for other people, or when you are doing work in the church, you can feel that spirit. You can learn things about your Heavenly Father, and you can learn about how He is, how He serves, and you become closer to Him. So I think that the organized religion is necessary so that you can learn these things. And then also, we can talk about the priesthood and ordination and all of those things that are necessary through an organized church, but not even getting into that, just from a spirituality standpoint is what I'm going for. There are reasons why having an organized religion is so helpful, because you learn from other people, you can serve other people, and you feel those things. But then also, don't get me wrong, you need to have an individual spiritual journey, because it's necessary to grow and to progress. So I think that both are important.
Yeah. And definitely remembering that, like, the main purpose of going to the church building is to partake of the sacrament so that we can remember what Christ did for us, and focusing on that cleansing power of the atonement week by week is something that you can't recreate really at home. I know with COVID there's been special circumstances where a lot of people have been given the permission to do the sacrament at home, but in general, the organization of doing it with a presiding authority and just doing it the way it's been done for generations at this point is something really powerful. And, I haven't always been the best person at going to all 3 hours back when it was 3 hours. I'll be honest. I was like, I got the sacrament. What was the point of the other stuff? But when you are trying to get as close to your Savior as possible, I think putting yourself in an environment where you're going to hear the most about Him and have the extra time to focus on it is beneficial as well. And like you were saying, it's so great that they are return that focus to being in the home, so you're focusing at home and taking what you learn to church to help edify yourself and others, and instead of the reverse there.
Yeah. I do. I feel like even talking about it now, like it makes me miss like going to church and taking the sacrament. I feel like, and I don't know if this is part of the reason why there seems to be a trend of people my age leaving around my age, leaving the church. But there is something to be said about having to like push through for quite a few years when you have young kids when it comes to church attendance. Not saying anything about like spiritual, like still being a member or whatever, but just honestly, especially when it was 3 hours, going to church with kids is like, well, so glad we got dressed up for me to sit in a hall with the kid for 3 hours, So sometimes it's like, yeah, everyone gets to go to church and be edified, but I don't get to go to church and be edified. I get to go to church and be a mom in the hall, But I feel like in saying that, talking about motherhood's hard, but I love my children, and I like sitting here talking about the sacrament. It's like, oh, like I do like recognize the spirit and the importance of that,
For sure. I think it's hard to replicate. Even when I was doing it at home over the break, I don't know if it was my mindset or what, but I think it feels stronger to me at church with everybody. I think especially because it helps me recognize that I'm not going through the plan of salvation for me and my nuclear family, like just my siblings and me, but everyone that's out there is my brother and sister. Like I'm going to church, and I'm hoping to see Zach in heaven. I'm hoping to see, Brother Turner or whoever is out there, right? Trying to go as a whole group. But bringing that to eternity, sure. Last week's blog post was De Mulieribus in Aeternitatem, which is concerning women into the eternities. So I took a picture of this garden that Liz McGuire went to when I was in Italy. I don't know if you recognize that, Kimmy.
It's beautiful.
But I was there. It wasn't Liz McGuire. I was actually there.
I was looking
So you said you read this, which makes you more prepared than most people. But what were some thoughts you had?
Well, when I first read it, I laughed because I forgot that I was going to be on this week when I read it, and I was like, "Oh, he wrote that blog post because him and I have talked about that a million times lately." And I was like, "Oh, he did write that," partly because I was going to be on here because we have talked about it so many times. Well, I don't know. Where would you like me to?
You can start with whatever you want. If you
thing that.
Sorry, we're a little offset. You're good to go. If you already have your thought ready, you go for
it. One thing that you mentioned in there is that you feel like, and something that you and I have talked about is with polygamy, that you feel like polygamy is the exception and not the rule, which is a thought that I hadn't viewed it that way before. Like I'm sure many others, have been in a Sunday school class, and there's been the brother that's there that raises his hand that says, if any of you are against polygamy in the afterlife, then you're sinning because that's what it's going to be, and you're choosing not to follow God's plan. And it always really bothered me. And so the thought of you saying, that you view it as the exception and not the rule, there's still a part of me that struggles maybe with it even being an exception. And you and I have talked about this, but I have a question for you, even though we haven't like really dived into this, but this was the question that I had when I read your blog post. So you
Yes.
view it as the exception, not the rule. So what are your thoughts about it still being something that like you as a man could be still to more than one woman, like here, like in a modern day setting? I mean, obviously not married at the same time, but still to um, more than one woman. So is that, explain your thoughts on that to me. Is that just something that like put a pin in it and it'll all be sorted out, or do you have an
Not
opinion on that?
necessarily. I think part of it is like your question is like first. I'll address it as like the practice in general. Why I think it's fine, and then maybe get into why it's not the reverse. Like a woman can't get sealed to more than one man, and kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I think primarily it works in the sense that if I were to get married, my wife passed away, and I married another woman who had never been married before, and I got sealed to her. I think the idea is that why would I deny her celestial glory at the top of the celestial kingdom if she didn't do anything wrong? I was the first person she married, right? So she should be entitled to the same blessings that my other
Right.
wife would be in the eternities. I think that's the crux of it. I know that I personally view it that more often than not, women are more righteous than men. So there's a high probability of more women being in heaven than men, which has a lot to do with it. And I think what will apply to the second case, where why women don't get sealed to multiple men, whereas men can get sealed to multiple women, is the idea of having children. I don't know what having spiritual children necessarily looks like, if it's an actual act you perform to have children like we do here on earth, or if it's the idea of teaching children and they follow you and they become your spiritual children. That part's a little murky to me, and I've seen it explained both ways personally. But if we approach it as that it is an actual act of having children the way it is here on earth, then the highest yield pair of people, or I guess group of people, would be multiple women and one man, as the man can impregnate multiple women at the same time, whereas a woman can only be impregnated the one time for the 9 months. And as it says in Jacob, I posted here, for if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things. That is the fastest way to grow a seed, is to have polygamy. And that's been seen anthropologically as well in other societies that aren't necessarily part of the church. They practice polygamy, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it revolves around women having lots of children, and that being the wealth of their nation, I guess. And I don't want to like put women into a box like that. That's all they're good for. I'm just saying that's one of the applications of polygamy, right?
So I have a question. With the logic of you saying that it would be denying, I mean, that by being sealed to another woman who hasn't had the chance to be sealed to somebody else, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I'm talking about. This is obviously only being married to one woman at a time in this context. But so that man can help that woman get into the special kingdom, to salvation. So, but what about a man? You know, like if Eric were to die and I were to get remarried and that person had never been sealed to somebody, so what about him?
And that logic would fall under the idea expressed in my second part, where because there are so many more women, that there's going to be a woman that hasn't yet been sealed that could then be sealed to him. Because we don't, like someone who was born 4,000 years ago and died without being sealed, but was a faithful woman, in spiritual age, she could be the same age
Mm-hmm.
as the man that died, just barely, or whatnot.
Right.
So she could be holding a spot for him when he dies, and you can consider her the standard bearer for that unit, that family unit. And that's where it gets harder to predict, where everything's going to line up, because we don't know who's all going to be there. We don't know all the ins and outs of it, but we do know it will be taken care of, which is a less than satisfying answer, I guess. But yeah, the way I see it, I usually see men that haven't been sealed yet will be able to be sealed to women who haven't been sealed yet previous as well. And those units will take priority over a polygamous unit, right? And I had another thought that was right there with it, but it's kind of escaping me. Because I could see the question that would form from that logic, and then I lost it. I don't know. Have you thought about this much, Zachary?
I know that I've gotten this question a fair amount of times. One of my best friends in high school, best female friends, Jesse, don't feel offended. One of my best female friends in high school, she, while I was out on my mission, she sent me a couple emails where she was going through this, I don't know if you call it a struggle, but a faith debate in her soul, trying to figure this out on polygamy specifically. And I don't know. I mean, there are parts of the doctrine of Christ that I love to look into and study for hours on end. And honestly, the polygamy one has never been one that's called my attention, because I figured I'm kind of the same thought process. It is such the minority. It's the exception to the rule that's going to happen maybe a few times, that I really haven't spent much time looking into it. But I do understand that it's based out of necessity, and it's out of Heavenly Father's plan, the way that He can make this work. And the one thing that I always take solace in is that Heavenly Father is never going to do anything to make anybody mad. He's never going to force anybody to do something that they're not going to enjoy. And so I think that if a woman doesn't want to be part of a polygamist group, that is fine. He will never make that happen. He will find a way, or something will work out where it's going to be happy. Things are going to be right. And I don't think that that's ever going to be an issue, in my opinion. And I think that we will learn more about this as we go, as we get on to the next parts of our eternal existence. But for me, I think it just comes down to the fact that I don't know, and I know that Heavenly Father would never do anything against our will, and it'll all work out.
Yeah, because you look at examples too with our parents. There's a possibility that eventually Dad will be married to Kim, just as longer than he was married to Mom, but she's gonna go back to Sam, and he'll go back to Mom after it's all said and done. And that might be strange at first, but I think when we die, our perspectives are changed as well, seeing the eternity backwards and forwards, and our ability to love increases so dramatically that we don't think of the same problems or the same divisions of love that we feel here. And I think that's a big part of it too. But like Zach said, polygamy is a voluntary thing. You're not forced into it, and there's no way that I can see God be like, "Oh, haha, you're stuck with that guy. He's a weirdo. Have fun." But that you're gonna be happy at the end of the day.
No, what I love about the thought of just that I'm at a place in my life where I feel like before, when I was younger, I was like, okay, well, they said that this is has to be how it's going to be on the other side. So I don't know how I'm going to come to terms with it, but I guess I'll just come to terms with it as it happens. But now, as an adult, I feel like I can say, you know what, my answer is no, and I'm okay with that. And like you said, there's a choice about it, right? Where and maybe on the other side things change, but the fact that I don't know, you have a choice to be like, you know what, I'm choosing not to be okay with that, and I'm okay that I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this discussion has come up a couple times between me and my wife, and it's funny because it's always the same thing. It's like she's like, I would not be okay sharing you, and I'm like, I would not be okay having more than one wife. You know, I really love you, and I only want to love you, and that's fine. You know, like that's, and so I don't think that it will ever be forced upon our family unit to take another one in. You know, I don't think it'll ever be forced into that situation. It'll be completely
Right.
voluntary. Just you know, my personal opinion on it. I think everybody's going to have their choice on how it works out.
You don't think she'd like if you said we should get 4 or 5 women in here?
Yeah, you know, I don't think she would. Just a thought.
Okay. What else did you kind of see in here that gave you more questions, or you maybe didn't agree with my stance on it?
I feel like
In my defense, I am a man, so it's harder to write
um,
about women. So, and I'm not
right.
married.
Well,
So.
I feel like that's what I was gonna say. Is that I feel like from a man's point of view, I can see how you feel like women aren't seen as anything other than like equal or someone to be next to you or someone to be revered. Um, but there's times where it a little bit can feel like as a woman, like, okay, well, I mean, even just in the organization of the church, right? It's a patriarch centered church, right? Like there's no female at the top of the church. And that's not to say I don't know how I'm gonna word this right. Um, but I feel like growing up, just because of not because of the priesthood that I feel lesser. That's not by any means the right wording that I'm looking for. But just like your bishop is in charge of your ward, right? So he, in a way, is a steward over you. And so, um, like if I were to have spiritual questions, I would maybe go to my bishop for counsel, right? I would go to this man of power for counsel, or even as a child, you go to your dad for blessings or for spiritual guidance. And not that I couldn't have gone to mom, but I feel like it was just, and not that dad in any way made mom seem any less, but I just feel like because he's the one who could like give me a blessing, that he's the one that I should go to for spiritual guidance in some things. But totally, I could still go talk to mom about things, obviously too. Um, so I feel like in some of those aspects, as a girl, it's like, oh well, I've kind of had to come into my own to be like, I don't need Eric to be my spiritual guide. I just need him to be my spiritual partner and be open to conversations. Um, so I feel like I'm really talking in circles right now. So I'm going to stop for a second and gather.
So basically, so this ties into my nice quote down here from Chris Brown, which is ironic, I guess.
Kind of ironic, but it's okay. We'll move forward.
The idea that it's not a one in front of the other, both working together to reach the same goal, right? But you feel like as a unit,
Right.
that might be possible, but through an organization, it's harder to see because, women in the hierarchy of the church are over the Relief Society, which is over the women, the young women's, and the primary, and it's very cut off, whereas the men kind of cover both genders at the same time. Is that an accurate representation?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like on the outside. I mean, I will just say, though, that in my time as Elders Quorum president, when I was in there with the bishop in those meetings, between the bishop, myself, and the Relief Society president. It's like, I mean, yes, the bishop is there for guidance and counsel, but like the women are so in charge of what they're doing that it was more like, do you need us? Like, because we don't, like, if you, we need you more than you need us is almost what it felt like in every meeting we had. I was like organizing events or something, and I'd be like, can we ask the Relief Society for this? You know, and like, but they were always just so on top of their own stuff that it was never an issue, you know. So I don't know. I feel like it seems like that at a glance from an outside view, but at least my experience in those is always that they have very good control over what they're doing, and it is them running their show. You know, it's not, at least from my perspective, in that ward that I was in, it was never like the bishop telling the Relief Society to do something. It was, they were always very in charge of what they were doing and separate, very separate from what we were doing. So, you know, I think from an outside view, it can seem as though, like, yes, there's a high patriarchal order that is controlling a lot of the church, but it's, at least in my experience, it's not that way.
Yeah.
Right. And I do feel like, I think in some of it, there was some language in the church that has changed, but there was some wording of some things that made it feel like, as a woman, it's like the wording of things made it seem like that it was God, my husband, and then me, and that's how revelation was to be received. But that's not what I was taught growing up, and it's and the wording has since been changed. So it kind of goes back into that triangle, right? That it's like there's a relationship between me and God, and a relationship between God and my husband, and then a relationship between me and my husband, right? And so I appreciate that language has been changed to reflect that, because that was so confusing to me, that I was like, well, I always thought I could receive revelation from my family equal to my husband. And then there was a time, like I said, that there was certain wording in the church that I was like, oh, did I like misunderstand that my whole life? Like, is there something that is preventing me from like having that revelation? Like, I don't understand. And the wording is like since been changed, where I'm like, okay, no, I was on the right path of like, I get to receive my own revelation. This is not great for your podcast, but I can hear my 5-week-old screaming, and he's been screaming for a few minutes, and my door's being knocked on. So we may need to pause.
You can definitely pause if you want.
Sorry.
Yeah, for sure.